Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true firsthand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. Oftentimes on this podcast, I have individuals on who are such a wealth of incredible information that all of it just won't fit into one episode. One of my favorite things to do is to have these guests come back on for a round two and continue our adventure down the rabbit hole together, where we can pick up where we left off and get into other juicy subjects surrounding plant medicines, such as consciousness, what they feel the meaning of life is, and other subjects which allow the gift of being able to open and stretch our minds and hearts with the intention of adding more substance, awareness, and possibility to our experience of life as a whole. Today's returning guest is one of my absolute favorite souls to conversate with, as his understanding of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual planes of existence allows for a well-rounded, full spectrum conversation that can include references and examples that allow whoever is listening to be able to relate the subjects and ideas we will be speaking about back to their own life for maximum benefit and understanding. So please help me in welcoming back my man, Jason Gandzjuk, to the show. Jason, pleasure to have you here with me again, my man.
What's going on there, brother man? Thank you for having me back for another action-filled podcast.
Absolutely, man. You know, when we were chatting before we hit record about like what we're going to talk about today, right? And, you know, in our last episode, we chatted a lot about your personal experiences and we gave some context for what medicines like ketamine are like, you know, what they do, 5-MeO DMT / Bufo, your experiences facilitating medicine ceremonies. And, you know, I thought a really cool place to pick up where we left off would be to talk about like, you know, really get into, you know, what your recent experiences have been and what the things that you're most curious on are, right? Like as magicians in this reality, right? And as people who enjoy plant medicines, we're curious as hell, man, right? Like I know for me, like I interact with plant medicines because I have questions, right? That really are not being answered to my liking anyway in the textbooks I read. And except for like maybe Paul Chek, you know, no one really touches on these things, right? And so, you know, I'm really excited for you and I to have this conversation and chat about what the main things that you're curious on are, right? And, you know, I feel like a great framework for this episode is that for everyone listening, like we're going to be talking about things that we still might not have the answers to, right? But we're genuinely curious about. And so I'd love if we could start off by having you discuss like, you know, what's the most recent, you know, experience you had where it left you going, maybe I didn't know what I thought I knew. And that's amazing because now I'm being stretched in a way that allows me to open up my frame of reference and allow my consciousness to expand along with it.
Yeah, man, I'd love to actually share one of my recent experiences I had just a few months ago, actually. And I commonly work with, 5-MeO DMT or Bufo various. So I haven't been working with mushrooms for a while. I'd say about a good year and a half. But I was just recently called to work with mushrooms, and I do quite a big dose. Normally when I do medicine, I do a big dose. And I don't do a big dose just to say, oh, okay, I did a huge dose. I did 10 grams of mushrooms just to say that. Just as you can probably relate is we have been able to handle, and this doesn't, separate us from other people who can't. It's just through experience, you end up realizing that, okay, I can start opening up, let's just use the metaphor, Pandora's box more.
Yes.
And as you start opening it up, you start seeing things differently. It shifts your perspective and it brings awareness with that shift in perspective. So, I ended up doing about 16 and a half grams of mushrooms.
Wow, that's a big dose.
it was quite the ride, to say the least. And I am happy that you're actually asking me this question because I haven't really had a chance to really articulate the experience. And that's one thing that I've been going through a lot of feeling lately, being in the relationship I'm in. And that's the thing. You really can't see yourself unless you're in a relationship. You see yourself in a relationship with your friends, your clients, your family, etc. But when you're in an actual intimate relationship, it actually allows you to see yourself from a completely different perspective. So since I've been in that relationship, I'm like, wow, to a certain degree, to where it's like I am seeing parts of myself that I originally thought I healed, but I haven't been able to process and heal to the depth of what I'm able to see with inside myself now, being in the relationship I'm in. So I've had a lot of stuff come up for me in regards to, I would say, suicide. And that's a word that I don't want to throw around like it's just a word, but it's a strong word. It is. And I have had experience where I've attempted it, 3 times. And it's like, why? Asking that question, why? And with my history and with my mom's history, she was very suicidal, and she tried to commit suicide several times and ended up in the hospital with a tube in her stomach, trying to bring her back to life. And the fact that she had over 6 miscarriages before she had me, and then she was told that she wasn't going to be able to get pregnant, and then a year after, she ended up having me, so I was like a miracle baby. It's just my nervous system has been so wired and tuned into how my mom's nervous system was. So leading up to this mushroom experience, I was bringing in a lot of that awareness so I can process it in a way to where I can release not just that force within inside of myself that wants to go to that place of suicide, but also allow my mom to heal in a way that she hasn't been able to heal before. Because just because she transitioned out of the physical realm doesn't mean her healing's done.
Yes.
The healing that we are doing on this plane, we're also healing people that you can say have been dead as well, because they still have a spirit. So, of course, doing that big of a dose of mushrooms really opened up Pandora's box for me, you can say, to the fullest. And I started off the experience standing in my place here in Carmel drumming. And it ended up getting very intense after about 45 minutes to an hour of drumming, where I was just drumming on the drum, and every strike I would do on the drum it was as if I was drumming the universe, the earth itself. And it just got so intense. So I ended up going inside and just sitting down and kind of just going into, contemplation and meditation. And as soon as I just closed my eyes, things just got wild, like literally to the point of where it was almost out of control. And things were just happening so quickly. I was just seeing like thousands of different lives of experience just all happening right in front of me on fast forward. It's like previous lives, all the future lives, everything was just all happening at once. And to integrate that experience, which took me about at least a good week, and I'm not saying I'm done integrating, but to integrate the parts of myself that ended up getting really hurt through that experience. And that's one thing that I had to learn, actually, is I had to realize that I should have had somebody there actually helping me hold space, and that's just something that I have to go through myself, and I have to learn the hard way. And that's one thing I do experiment to a certain degree, and I should have had somebody there holding space for me. So it's just that itself was hard for me to actually hold my own space that deep in the medicine. And what I was really experiencing was what my mom went through for years. And I was experiencing her hurt through actually myself. And it was as if I was in her body experiencing everything she was experiencing. And it gave me a piece of forgiveness that I haven't been able to even understand until now, to forgive her. Because that's the thing, we can't relate to a degree to where we can understand why somebody would do that. Why would somebody that deeply loves you, for example, end up taking their life away, which is what my mom did. And I haven't been able to understand that. Like, why, Mom? I still will ask myself, why, Mom, would you do that? So it's like that experience gave me the capacity to see why she did that. Now, does that give her a reason and an excuse to do that? I'm not saying yes or no. I'm going to keep that neutral. But I can relate to her and understand why she did do that and to forgive her for that. And it was just 4 or 5+ hours, super intense. And I was feeling a lot of the hurt she was experiencing when she was around. Then I was also feeling a lot of the hurt that I've experienced ever since I was, age 5, 6, when I started, getting hurt racing motocross. And it was literally as if like thousands of years were just packaged within 5 hours. And how that just really brought me to a place to be more accepting. I guess you can say that's the word, more accepting of how things have been and how things are right now. And allowing things to be as they are, knowing as they are is exactly how they need to be for optimal growth and development. And for you to be aware of what really unconditional love is.
Yes.
And it brings you to a place of what unconditional love really is. without any separation whatsoever. And it's the hard thing. It's hard to really articulate that experience, but that's just the first thing that I wanted to touch on. You can look at that as, from an outsider's perspective, being a very traumatizing, out of control experience. But I have to say that I had the capacity even going in to where I was able to actually handle it. Everything happens for a reason, and I can say wholeheartedly that parts of myself have significantly been able to release a lot of that force that has had me think about suicide.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
And seeing that my suicidal thoughts are actually governed from my mom. Since that was a lot of her makeup and a lot of her desire she had in life. And seeing that it's up to me to finish the business that she didn't finish. Yes. And I don't remember if it's Carl Jung that says the quote, and, I'm saying it, to a certain degree lightly because I don't know it word for word, but it's pretty much your parents' unfinished business is your finished business. Pretty much your parents' unmet needs are your needs to meet.
Yes.
And until you make the unconscious conscious, it will be pretty much, creating your whole life, and it will be creating the symptoms that you are often questioning why I have them.
That makes so much sense. And, a lot of things that you said there were really deep. And I wrote some notes down because, the same way, talking about taking large doses to start with, right? Like, for anyone listening who's like, wow, that's a really large dose. Well, yes, right. Deadlifting 500 pounds is a lot of weight, right? And you don't start off there, right? But if you train, right, and you're eating right and you're doing the right things, there will come a time where you can walk up to a bar and deadlift 500 pounds, right? To put it in the context of something that's a little more grounded, right? And when we look at relationships, right? What is a relationship? A relationship is a relational ship, right? And the way that I love to think about this is it's an open invitation, an agreed upon invitation from that joining between you and someone else, whether it's platonic or romantic, to project onto one another, right? And to be able to help one another heal. And who are each of us? We are each other, right? We all come from the same source of spirit. And it makes perfect sense what you were saying there. And I could picture exactly what you were going through because I've gone through a lot of that with my father passing. And when I specifically take mushrooms, I'll tap into his unfinished business, right? And what are we really tapping into there, right? We were talking before the podcast, started about this whole idea of, our physical body may pass, right? But our soul continues living up to a certain point, depending on what lineage you follow, right? And so like your mom's soul, I imagine, is still very much alive. And so she is still going through those challenges, and you have the opportunity to heal that, not only for her, but for you as well, because you have her DNA, you have her genetics, right? And a lot of her genetic code is implemented into you. And so, these are the real gifts that we get to experience and take part in when we interact with plant medicines. And that's why it's so important when anyone is deciding to go into a plant medicine that they have this awareness, right? That a lot of what they feel may not be quote unquote theirs, but it is theirs at the same time, right? Because we are connected, right? We're all connected through our infinite source of spirit, which is where we all come from. And, it's interesting. You were talking about your romantic relationship, right? And certain challenges and triggers that can come up, right? And Rachel and I have, dealt with these challenges as well, right? Where she will trigger something in me or I'll trigger something in her. And it's so important to be able to have that nonviolent communication where I can look to her and say, I believe I was just triggered, right? And I'm not going to say it's from you, but it brought something up that now I have the opportunity to look at. I would really like some help with this. Can we go in on this? Right? Because I don't want to blame her and play the blame game and say, oh, you triggered me. And so therefore stop speaking what you're speaking and stop saying what you're saying, because then what are we essentially saying? I don't feel I'm fit for healing. Right? And is that the kind of power as a magician that we want to tell ourselves? Is that the reality we want to create for ourselves? Right? And everyone gets to make that choice. But I know, using discernment for myself, that is definitely not the choice I want to make for myself, because my only purpose here on this life, and I imagine you have a very similar viewpoint in this, is to ascend, right? Is to move through the quote unquote muck, right? That a lot of times is not ours, a lot of times might be ours, right? But to move through that and find the feather bed on the other side of the abyss, as Terence McKenna talks about. And, when you were talking about drumming, music is the carrier wave for emotion, right? So it bypasses the ego, it bypasses the inner critic, it bypasses all of these components of the mind. It can get directly into the 4D reality of your heart and your feeling body. And so music, that's why when you look at any lineage, and I know you know this, right? If you go to the jungle, if you sit in ceremony with anyone who's experienced as a shaman or as a facilitator, they're going to be singing an Icaros or singing some type of music or drumming or playing rattles, right? What is that, right? It's to keep you out of the mind, right? Where things can get really challenged, aka 3D reality. And it's meant to put you into 4D reality. So then the opportunity is you can connect that 3 and 4D reality to ascend to the 5th dimension, right? And then beyond. And this is what a good facilitator or shaman understands, right? Is that they're playing within interdimensional or multidimensional realities. And so their job is to be able to notice when someone is going a little bit farther out than they're ready for in that moment, right? When they're walking up to a bar that's way too heavy for their amount of strength at this time, right? And they can have music to bring them back, right? And gauge and calibrate their experience. And that's why, really what I heard you talking about so beautifully there was what surrender actually feels like and what its purpose is, right? Because when you're in a very deep experience, especially with mushrooms, something very sacred and very older, especially with something like Bufo, there really is that is the agreement that is sometimes unconsciously signed or consciously signed, depending on how aware you are when you interact with that medicine, right? You're essentially telling that medicine, I am ready to surrender. And so if you are not actually ready to surrender, then you have no purpose playing with these medicines. And that's why I love what you so beautifully and poetically said there, was that there was a moment where you decided, or you chose to believe, this is what's happening and that's okay, right? I'm going to feel this. I'm safe to feel this. And I know that on the other side, there is a light at the end of this tunnel. And so my objective now is to surrender until that light comes to me, because emotions and all of these feelings, they're finite, right? So a lot of times in my own life, and I imagine for those listening, and I imagine for you too, I have unconsciously run from emotions, right? Emotions that ultimately might only be 5 minutes of pure feeling, and then they're gone. And it might take away 10 years of quote unquote agony, right? And what do? We distract ourselves, right? It's most of this is unconscious, right? And this is why the integration work and the self-development work is so important, right? Because it's knowing thyself, right? That's why, so many people have said that for eons now, right? Know thyself. What does that actually mean? It means to understand who you are at a level. So when you actually go into these ceremonies, for this example, and you're meeting yourself, right? You actually understand that, because you're like, oh, I already experienced a hint of this. And so now I'm getting the full multi-meal of what that hint was, right? Maybe I smelled the food cooking before, and now I'm actually presented with the meal. And my job or my mission in this experience is to eat this meal, right? And the more that I try to say, well, I have to go clean my room before I eat this meal. I have to go, respond to these text messages before I clean this meal. And I know we're talking esoteric here, but as a metaphor, it gets us away from just hey, what we're needing in that moment, to use another metaphor, is we need to fill ourselves up with something. And when we fill ourselves up with that meal, we're able to have the energy to be able to move through these emotions. And so the meal in this metaphor is the emotion, right? It's feeling and saying and being present and knowing that we are infinite, right? And so even if this physical body dies during that experience, which yes, is challenging, right? And it's a really scary thing to think about. And that's the humanness, right? Allow yourself to be human. And at the same time, realize that if we are infinite and you choose to believe that, and I know both you and I choose to believe that in our experience, not because we know it quantitatively, but because we've lived the other side where we believe we're not infinite. And that reality sucks for me anyway, right? And so I choose to believe I'm infinite, right? In my own truth. And so therefore, it makes it a lot easier to move through these experiences and understand that whatever happens is exactly what's meant to be. And I think that's the most beautiful lesson that I've learned through plant medicines that I've been able to integrate into my life, is that whatever happens, right? The other day we had a nor'easter, right? The power went out. I was nervous about my basement flooding, all of these things, right? And it was so much easier to go, well, in some way, shape, or form, there's a lesson here for me, right? And what I chose for that lesson to be in that moment, what I picked up from it it was further telling me or showing me how to respond to what life throws at you rather than react, and see it as happening for you rather than to you. And so I love that, man. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? I wanted to stop by while I had your ear and share a very special announcement with you. You may have heard people say that we are facing an epidemic of loneliness in the world right now. We believe that this is only half of the story, and that the real epidemic and the root of feeling loneliness is a lack of connection. Do you want to connect to more purpose and passion with the important work you are doing? Do you wish you had closer friendships with people who understand you, listen to you, and are truly present with you? Are you wishing you and your partner could move deeper into love together? The connection in all of these areas comes down to the one most important element of connection: the ability to connect with yourself. If you are ready to see change in your life, if you are ready to feel differently when you wake up in the morning, if you are ready to step into the life you envision for yourself, the first and only route to making these changes is settling in, quieting down, and being able to connect to yourself. Now, this can be a major challenge in today's world with media, culture, and other energies that pull us out of our ability to connect. When you've tried fitness, meditation, and other self-development practices and still find yourself feeling alone and lacking connection, you may be feeling out of options and wondering if you'll ever be able to tap into your full potential that you know deep down is possible in your life. What we have found in working with our clients is that plant medicines, and cannabis in particular, can guide us in having the experience of what true connection looks and feels like. In this way, cannabis can act as a rite of passage for connection and a gateway toward the spouse, tribe, mission, and life you know you are ready for. Now, the pitfall here is that many people become codependent on the medicines, such as cannabis, and expect the medicine to do the work for them. If this continues, what will happen is the user will find themselves reaching for more and more cannabis to feel connection, without taking ownership of their role in the outcome of their experience, and thus they will fall into repeating the same painful patterns. As Zen Buddhism teaches, how you do anything is how you do everything. Therefore, if this painful pattern is showing up in your relationship with cannabis, it is likely a reflection of the same patterns you're experiencing in your friendships, romantic relationships, business, and your relationship with yourself. Learning to work with cannabis effectively will supercharge your experience and will help you get the result you are actually seeking, which is connection. We created a program to support seekers and high achievers like you in doing exactly this. To learn how to work with the healing power of cannabis to connect you back to yourself so you can unlock purpose, passion, and creativity in all areas of your life. What this program will give you is the long-lost user manual for cannabis. This user manual will teach you how to connect with cannabis correctly so that the plant can act as your spiritual aid and ally in life, just as our ancestors understood and practiced. If you're ready to unlock the full power of cannabis, meet like-minded people on the same path as you, build more purpose into your life, and have the most fun doing homework you've ever had, this message is for you. To learn more and qualify for your spot in the program, hop over to our Instagram profile at highly.optimized and book a discovery call. The conscious cannabis revolution is here. Will you be joining us? Sending all of you love. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Amen. To conclude, what I've been able to integrate, at least out of that experience, is what causes our hurt? What causes us to actually respond in a way that's not compassionate and empathetic in relationship? What causes me to get triggered? That's the thing that we often sometimes can forget if we don't understand it, is we will try to heal something that will actually end up creating more resentment and more pain, have it be short-term or long-term. And that's our image that we actually try maintaining. And we have a lot of images. You can say the images are our personas. You can say they are our masks that we wear. We all have different images We both have the image of being a lifestyle holistic health practitioner. We have a certain image that we carry in relationship, or we have multiple images. And then we also will have an image of the person that we're in relationship with. The point I'm getting at here is we will do everything that we can to maintain our image, and we will hold them pretty much. We will strain them and prevent them from having the freedom. So they have to maintain their image, because normally it's their image that we end up actually loving and enjoying being around. And we prevent them from having the freedom to change, because if they change, that means the image is changing. And we all have an image. You can look at the image as being a whiteboard. And it's important that at the end of the day, you completely erase that whiteboard so you can have a fresh image the next day. But a lot of us don't erase that whiteboard. So we're just accumulating on this image or images. And it's the image that I have of myself that gets triggered and that gets hurt. And when I have that image, it prevents me from actually seeing what there is to see. It's like this will probably put it in a better context. I have images of all the sunsets I've ever seen in my whole life. Thousands and thousands and thousands of sunsets we've seen. I go to the beach and I say, that's the most beautiful sunset. I am saying that's the most beautiful sunset because of all of the ideas and images I've seen of sunsets. So I'm really actually not seeing that sunset, because my idea, my perspective of that sunset is based off of everything else I've seen. So it doesn't actually allow me to see what there is. And that's one of the biggest things in a relationship, is for us to pretty much erase the content that we will accumulate so there can be freshness, so there can be a fresh blossom. So there's nothing that's going to be getting triggered. You can actually be in a relationship without having image against image or images against images.
Yes.
And I've seen that anytime I get triggered, is it really me that's getting triggered at my whole? Or is it the image that I'm trying to maintain of myself that's getting triggered? When I feel like I'm getting hurt, or when I feel like maybe business could be going better, is it the image of myself being a holistic health practitioner that's getting hurt and feeling that way? It is. It's that image that we're trying to maintain that's getting hurt. And we try healing that image without understanding that it's the image that's getting hurt. And we can't heal the image necessarily. We have to understand in a way to where we can completely erase that image so we can start with freshness every single day. It's like that death and rebirth. And when I am saying death, I'm not talking about necessarily the physical death. When I say we need to be having a death and rebirth every second, we need to be dying to everything that we're accumulating, because it prevents us from actually being present. We will end up having the past modify the now, which will be modifying the future. No wonder people are stuck in fear, because everything's being modified for them. It makes us be in this, it makes us stuck in this illusion. And it can be very hard to get out of this illusion. And yes, plant medicine can open you up to where you see the illusion that you've created. And it can be scary. It can be a hard thing to actually surrender to. That's the difference between somebody doing a big dose of medicine compared to somebody else who's doing a big dose of medicine. And if somebody's not surrendering with that big dose of medicine, it can be extremely traumatizing, because they're trying to hold on. Surrendering is the death that I'm talking about. So we need to be able to surrender to everything that we're experiencing in life. Unless it's going to hold us, we're going to be a victim to it. It's going to hold us, on hostage. Wanted to add that in regards to what I've been able to understand and conclude there with that is it's just the images that I've created of myself, the images I've created of other people that is creating the conflict and division in my life. So it's important for me to allow people to be as they are, have compassion and empathy, and allow them the freedom that they need to where they can make the changes that they need to make without actually expressing my opinion in a way that's going to create more conflict, because we're all learning and growing at our own pace. And if you try to fast forward that pace, it can end up doing more harm in the long run.
We are all walking each other home, right? Like that is what we're quote unquote meant to do. And, you were talking about like what gives us this challenge, right? And at some point we stop being I am and we start being I, right? And that's what causes attachment, right? And attachment is essentially the unconscious belief that we don't have any faith, right? That we're scared of what's going to happen, right? That we see life happening to us rather than for us, right? And I've gone through many iterations of this. And like I say often, there's levels to this, right? The same way that, when you go through a challenge, if I've gone through this before where I'm like, oh, good, that challenge is over. It's like, No, that level of it might be over, right? If you've been able to integrate it, but there's probably another challenge waiting for you, right? And it's being able to see these challenges happening for you. And, I use gym metaphors because this is one of the best areas I can relate it to, where if you really love exercise, then you're excited to set a new PR, right? Yet at the same time, that's challenging, right? That's a whole new ball game, right? If you've never deadlifted 500 pounds and you've done 480 and you go to 500, you're scared when you go onto that bar, right? But you're also excited. And so it's that type of energy. If we can bring that into a full spectrum of view of life, then life becomes an adventure again, right? Children, before they have an ego, are not scared about anything because they're still connected to the source of infinite spirit within. And the only status quo in life is change, right? Like change is the status quo, right? It's constantly changing, right? And you were talking about these different identities, and the image that got downloaded to me was like a kaleidoscope, right? Everything in life is changing as fast as a kaleidoscope, right? And if we stop, because if we love one image in that kaleidoscope so much that we refuse to allow the kaleidoscope to stop going, then what are we doing? We're preventing the beauty of the full entire scope of that kaleidoscope to be able to do its thing. And so, that's how I choose to think about these things. And with regards to other people, and I'll make it more personal, I have fallen into many iterations of expectations, right? And you were talking about like images, right? What image are you holding in their head? I think that's synonymous with an expectation, right? Like, what am I expecting this person to show up as, right? If I expect my partner, we'll use romantic partners, to walk in the door in a certain way and hang her keys a certain way and give me a hug, and then one day she walks in and throws her keys on the counter and walks right by me and doesn't give me a hug, do I choose to make that about me? Or do I choose to come from compassion and go up to her and go, hey, I noticed that, like, you didn't give me a hug. Like, is there something going on in your life, right? Not because I'm concerned about getting the hug for myself, but because I'm concerned because my partner, someone I love, is obviously going through something that is challenging to them in that moment. And they're losing presence, right? They might be stuck in the mind. They might be stuck in a lot of different things, triggers, things like that. And so I think that's a perfect iteration and an imagery of, how we can come with compassion. And then also the other side of what it might feel like and look like when someone does not come from compassion, right? Like a lot of times, once again, I made it about the I. Oh, she must not be hugging me because I did something wrong. And you know what? I didn't do anything wrong. So I'm going to go tell her that, like, hey, I expect a hug when I walk in, right? All of these types of things are where we run amok. And it's those type of mannerisms that plant medicines can illuminate so much and so well. And just as you said, a lot of times these things can be scary because to the degree that we are attached and to the degree that we are unaware of that attachment, that is the degree to which we are going to be challenged to a higher level when we interact with plant medicines until we invoke surrender, right? And what is surrender? It's saying, I have faith in the process of life. I have faith that all of this is happening for me. I have faith that my partner came in and didn't give me a hug because this is an opportunity for me to come with full presence and compassion and love and help that person, aka myself, right? Because we are all just mirrors of one another, help myself heal something and allow myself to be that guide for that person, right? We are all guides in training, whether we realize it or not, right? We're all training to be master guides in whatever way we do, right? Whether you're someone who pumps someone's gas and someone shows up stressed out and you can be the one smile they saw all day that stops them from committing suicide when they get home, or you're someone who is a coach, right? And we do this for a living, right? Everyone has that gift and that opportunity to do that and to be that one reason that someone chooses life over death, right? Chooses life in this physical body over death in this physical body. And really, I see it as like the Tao Te Ching talks about the pendulum, right? And, I see in society right now that there's an unawareness on one side of this argument. And basically what that side is it's surrender, right? It's the people that are talking like we are, right? We don't understand everything, but we're open-minded to the fact that we don't understand everything. And so therefore, when something quote unquote triggers us, we don't immediately jump to conclusions and expectations. We take a second to go, what's going on here? And we can have that conversation non-violently with the person or with ourselves or with a plant medicine or with a deceased loved one who we're connecting with on a soul level in a medicine ceremony and go, what's going on here, right? Like, what am I not seeing? What am I unaware to, right? And that is, in my opinion, one of the best tools. If you can embody that and truly embody it, most of your medicine ceremonies doesn't mean they're going to be easy, but you're going to be able to come out of them with a heightened state of awareness. And you're going to come out of it saying that was a good experience, right? Not that it was an easy experience, but that it was a good experience. And the other side of that pendulum is control, right? It's the people that are white knuckling life. And a lot of this is unconscious. They're not literally waking up and going, I choose to white knuckle life today, right? But they're scared, right? Because they're lacking faith, right? They think that this is all there is. And so they have to hold on with dear life, right? And personally, I choose to believe that everyone is doing the best with the information they have. And that is where people like yourself, people like I, people like the guy pumping gas, people like the people at a coffee shop, everyone has the opportunity to help someone release that white knuckle grip just a little bit. And that is the gift of life that we all have, right? Is to allow ourselves to be mirrored in one another and allow those relational ships to take us deeper into ourselves and allow us to understand ourselves at a deeper level. Because, really, we're all philosophers. We're all curious, right? Of like, who are we? Why are we here? What's our purpose, right? Where do we come from? What is the purpose of all this? Where do we go when we pass on, right? We all have these questions, right? And so I feel as though there are people at the end of surrender, right? Where it doesn't mean it's easy, but they remember, they have faith of like, okay, this has got to be happening to me for some reason. Why? Because I choose to believe it is, not because I can prove it quantifiably with this quantifiable science. It's always changing, but because I choose as a God embodied in human form to believe that and allow it to affect my life in a positive way.
Couldn't have been any better said, man. I completely agree. Yeah, I really do. Yeah, about surrendering in medicine, it's a very hard task for us to actually wholeheartedly do. And then one metaphor I like giving with medicine is, depending on the dose, you can imagine yourself, metaphorically speaking, as a sponge. So say you're a sponge that you haven't strung out. You're a sponge that's accumulated, all the grease and the food that you've been cleaning, the pans and the silverware with. And then you're going in to do medicine, depending on the dose, will depend on how much you're going to be squeezing that sponge. And then you can imagine a bucket underneath the sponge that's going to pretty much hold everything that gets squeezed out of the sponge. Now you do a big dose. You do a heroic dose of mushrooms. You go do 5-MeO-DMT. You even do ayahuasca or San Pedro. That's a pretty big squeeze on the sponge. So if you really squeeze the sponge, it's going to release a lot more. What is remaining in the bucket after that sponge gets squeezed is for you to integrate. Now, we have surrendering before medicine, which is one side of the equation. And then we have surrendering after the medicine to what we have to integrate. And that's one thing I've learned. I learned how to surrender before the medicine, but I didn't know how to surrender after the medicine. And it took me away from actually surrendering before the medicine, because actually you need to be able to surrender on both sides in order for there actually to be wholeheartedly surrendering in the situation. And surrendering to our integration is just as important as it is to surrendering before the medicine. Why? Is because it actually can be scarier to surrender to what we have to integrate. And we'll often run away from what we have to integrate. And then we'll be wondering why we're back in the same pattern and the same behavior that we were in before we did the medicine. Because we were scared and we ran away and we didn't surrender to what we know we have to change and what we have to integrate. And I can relate this to daily life. I've gotten asked, well, do you have any integration tips and techniques? Well, yeah, the integration tips and techniques are the same integration tips and techniques that I use daily, because we have to integrate everything we experience in life. We all experience challenges in life, in our daily life. We have to integrate that. Yeah, it can be more intensified and more amplified with medicine, but to a certain degree, we still have to integrate on a daily basis. So that's why just doing your practice in the morning, have it be Qigong, meditation, walking in nature, whatever that is for integration, that goes the same with medicine. Yeah, sometimes we need to modify things. Sometimes we may need to do a different art therapy technique based off of our medicine experience, etc. But pretty much integration tips and techniques for medicine are the same integration tips and techniques that you should really be inheriting in your daily life.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And, it reminds me of that saying, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So if you're not integrating your daily lives, right, and you're escaping through methods as distractions, such as, cannabis, such as tobacco, such as alcohol, such as food, such as pornography, such as TV, right? Such as being busy all the time, right? Let's talk about who is probably listening to this podcast right now. Most people that listen to this podcast are go-getters, right? And this is something that I've fallen into many, many times, right? Especially after my father passed away, where I realized that after my father passed away, I would get home from a 12-hour workday. And instead of relaxing and rejuvenating myself for the next day, I would I need to clean the house. I need to do laundry. I need to dust that random shelf that doesn't really need to get dusted, but I need to do it. Right. And so what was really going on there is that I was unconsciously afraid and fearful of what was underneath there. And, again, like, this is why the tools such as meditation, such as breath work, I always suggest that if someone is going to seek out a medicine, that they have a daily practice that's full of rituals, right? That are allowing themselves to start to get clear and prove to themselves, right? And have faith in themselves that they actually can integrate what they're going to be shown. And I love the sponge metaphor, right? Because what got downloaded to me too is, after you wring yourself out, you're going to have less moisture. And if you don't find the things in your life that can rehydrate that sponge, what's going to happen to that sponge? It's going to become dry and brittle, and it's eventually going to break down, right? And then what good is that sponge, right? How well is it going to be able to pick things up and clean things and be able to exist, right? It's going to break in half and it's going to cease to exist. And that's why, like, medicine ceremonies, like, the way I think about it, and one medicine that, this becomes very apparent with is MDMA, right? Because you feel so amazing when you're on MDMA. And then everyone talks about the next week is like, oh, the next week sucks. It's useless. I kind of just go on standby mode until that's over. And it's like, no, that's actually the medicine of MDMA, right? Like, yes, opening your heart is amazing, right? It's incredible, right? It's very, very useful, and it's very applicable to life. But also, what in your life have you been feeling okay about enough to not have the hard conversation about? What has been lying right below the surface that you've been able to distract away, right? Well, when your serotonin and your dopamine and your neurotransmitters are rocked right after doing MDMA, you're going to have that hard conversation because the pain point is going to be high enough to have it, right? And you're going to have that tough decision of whether or not to stay at your job, right? Whether or not to move across the country because you don't feel at home where you're at, right? All of those things are now made possible because of this chemical state change after something like MDMA as an example. And what I'm really hearing here too is that, no matter how experienced you are with these medicines, right? It's important to never allow the lower ego to get in the way and think, I got this figured out, right? Because what is the lower ego specifically always trying to do, right? Is a protection mechanism, right? As something that is ultimately useful for us in a certain way, but can be a slippery slope, right? It's saying, I know all about this. I got this, right? Like, we understand this, right? Because when we come into this world, it's all new, right? We're essentially men in black when we get here. We don't know why we're here. We don't know anything, right? So, and we never really end up knowing anything, but we think we do. We're brought into the illusion that we're supposed to know things, right? With school and whatever. And like, yes, we understand history. This is exactly what happened. It's like, well, do you know that? Are you 400 years old? It's like, well, no, but this is definitely exactly what happened, right? And so, like, what I'm seeing here is that no matter how much you do medicines, it's always important to go into a medicine ceremony specifically with the mindset of a child. Ultimate wonder, right? Who knows what might happen? I might know that I'm a holistic health coach and that I help men and that I interact with cannabis and that I'm a cannabis coach and that I have this program, right? But I mean, is that the way that I'm always going to be? It's what I'm doing today. But if I get too attached to that identity and then I go into my medicine ceremony and the medicine ultimately shows me something great that's coming next, but I'm too attached to what I'm doing now to be able to fully embody that, well, then I come out disintegrated, right? I mean, when you're going into a medicine ceremony, you're disintegrating, right? And so that's why integration is so important to be able to do. And it's a lifestyle, right? Integration, like you were saying, is not just something we do after a medicine ceremony, right? The word is hot around medicine ceremonies, but after a day of work, right? When we're meeting with clients all day and we're hearing their challenges, right? And we're helping them make sense of them and move through them. We need to integrate that at the end of the day, right? Otherwise, we're going to start having our mind go wild. And that's again why like great integration tools that I use are included are meditation, breath work, journaling, the mystery school rituals, right? Things that help me ground myself, right? Nasal breathing, things like this that are done on a daily basis. That's why they're called rituals, right? Because what they're really doing in a funny way is they're proving to yourself that you can handle the experience of life, because what is necessary to quote unquote handle life is not what you think you know. It's not a degree. It's not what friends you have. It's what you feel inside. It's how much you're proving to yourself on a daily basis that you're willing and committed to putting in the work, quote unquote, necessary, the love necessary to leave yourself with a full cup so that the next day you can go out and, like I was speaking about, you can be that smiling face for that person in our roles, right? You can be that sacred space for that person to unleash what their demons are, and you to be able to hold them and in kindness and compassion, reflect them back to them in a way that actually allows them to make sense of their life. Because really, like, what I feel everyone does in their own way is help one another be more comfortable and feel more safe with the experience of being alive, right? Because this life is a trip, right? It is a medicine ceremony. This entire life is a psychedelic experience. I mean, consciousness itself is a psychic substance, right? And so it's so important to be able to integrate these things that medicines teach us into our daily lives, because our daily life is a medicine ceremony. And that's how I choose to look at it in my own experience of life.
Exactly. And, to throw in one important thing with integration, just before people get too far ahead of themselves, is one of the most important things with integration that actually allows us the foundation on how to integrate are having values. Because if you don't have values, you're not going to know what you need to do in order to actually integrate for your own individual and your specific needs. So your values around nutrition, your values around movement, your values around sleep, and your values around for what you need to do to be a happy individual. Because if you don't know what happy making is for you, how will you actually know when you're going to be happy? So it's just having those simple 4 doctor values that Paul Chek actually teaches and that we've learned to teach, which gives you the foundation on how you need to integrate. Because you need to integrate off of nutrition, you need to integrate off of sleep, you need to integrate off of movement, and then you need to integrate off of happiness too. So when you have those 4 foundations, those 4 principles that give you the foundation, then you actually have the platform and the structure to where you're rooted on knowing what you need to do to actually integrate.
Absolutely. One of the things that I love about that is before we hit record, we were talking about my whiteboard behind me and my wants, right? And those wants, right? Our ability to manifest our reality as a magician in this physical realm is only made available when we have our basic needs met. And what are our basic needs? Food, water, love, support systems, shelter, these things, right? And so when these things are fulfilled, we then have the available space to be able to go out and create the lives that we want. But at the same time, if we are living in scarcity, right? Because we do not understand our values, right? So we don't even know what we stand for, because really values are what you stand for, right? What is your ethos as a human being? If we neglect to take the time to do that, right? And we do not prioritize that, then essentially we're lost, right? Like values are our anchors, right? Our core values are our anchors. Exactly like you said, they're what allow us to realize the path to quote unquote happiness, right? To joy, to love, to compassion, to charity, to hope, all of these higher dimensional states, right? And as the mystery schools talk about, like, we have this physical experience and our purpose here is to ascend, right? As I said before. And so if we do not have these core values, if we don't have these things, then ultimately we're really setting our soul up to have to do a lot of extra work when we transition out of this physical realm, right? Because our ultimate goal as a human being, and this might get a little out there for everyone listening, but just bear with me, is to become Elohim, right? To become the God of our universe. And so when we transition out of the physical realm, our soul is sent to the 4th dimension. And our ultimate goal is to get from the 4th dimension to the 7th dimension. And that, as we were talking about before, could take 1,000,000 human years, right? But we have the opportunity to quote unquote hack that system when we're in this reality and do what could potentially take 1,000,000 years in 120 years, right? 80 to 120 years, depending on your life expectancy. And so, this is why we talk so highly, you and I, about core values, about knowing what you stand for, about getting still, right? Like, we understand that in this reality, yes, no matter how enlightened you are, you still need to pay rent, you still need to take your trash out, right? But it's about prioritization, right? It's about realizing that, having non-negotiables each day, right? Like for me, I have 4 hours each morning. My mornings are sacred, right? I don't touch a phone. I spend my day, my morning, I wake up, I go outside, I connect with nature, I do alternate nostril breathing, and I do a consciousness expanding exercise through the senses. I'll pick a different sense, depending on what I usually do. When every 3 months, I'll pick a new sense. And so right now I'm working on sight. And so I'll pick one object outside, and it could be a leaf, it could be a car, it could be anything, right? And while I'm doing alternate nostril breathing and I'm blowing into my lower tandem, right? And I'm activating my gut brain, I'm activating my lower chakras that allow me to be balanced and rooted. What I'm doing is I'm focusing on one thing and I'm allowing all my thoughts to go away. And I'm just exploring that one thing. And I'm allowing myself to see the textures, to see the shapes, right? And to look at it with the eyes of a child with pure wonder. And then from there, I'm now down regulated and I have available space to be able to go into a meditation and actually go connect with my higher self. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. You can do it from a more shamanic meditation where you lay down, which are my personal favorites, just because I enjoy laying down when I meditate. But you can also do like more of a sanctuary meditation, right? Where your feet are touching the ground, you're rooted, but your head is facing up. And so then you're able to actually commune directly to your higher self through your quote unquote sanctuary, right? The place that you go where you meet with your higher self. And these are all like deep spiritual practices for anyone that's listening. And you can definitely reach out to Jason and I and get more information on, where we learn these things and how to apply them in your own life. But the purpose is like, those are my non-negotiables. Like I get into that and then I'll write my affirmations out. I'll say them to myself and then I'll read my manifestation, right? Because when I have that available space, now that I've gotten everything out of the way, I now have access to the 4D reality of my heart. And we know from Heart Math Institute that originally we thought that the brain communicated with the heart. And really, it's the other way around. The heart is the governing body of everything. It's in between our lower tandem and our higher tandem, right? It's the middle tandem. And so it's our middle energy center. And so really what we're doing is we're giving an opportunity to actually reinvoke our state as a magician and manifest what we want. And to the degree you can do this, right? So to the degree you can allow yourself to get space every morning and then write out your manifestation, what is a manifestation? It's just what you see yourself doing as you in a parallel multiverse reality, right? So like mine, I'll talk about my life, my business, how I'm feeling in my relationship, where I'm living, what kind of house I have, what's around the house, what I do, right? Like I have this, you'll see it on my whiteboard. I have a 4,000 square foot house on a lake. Each morning I take dips in the lake with Rachel. We have friends come stay. It's cozy, inspiring, and is our favorite place to be, right? It's things that get you excited about where you're going, right? And they're all attached to your values. Connection. Mine are actually trust, liberation, and honor. And so those are my three that I've chosen in my personal life. Then I have my business values and everything like that. And so within those, I can do exercises to go, I honor myself by doing my morning routine, right? My morning rituals. I honor my business by showing up on time. I honor my relationship by romancing my partner and allowing her to feel like she's the person that my heart beats for, right? And then liberation. I liberate myself by doing my morning rituals. I liberate my business by not getting attached to what I think is the best thing for my business. I liberate my relationship by realizing that maybe I don't know how I feel. And maybe I don't know what the other person is feeling. And maybe I don't know what the best thing for our relationship is without consulting with the other person in this equation and asking her like, hey, how are things going? Right. And I think I was talking to you beforehand, like we have these board meetings, right? Because I know that I don't know, right? I've fallen into this trap many times with her, right? Where I'm like, oh, everything's perfect. Everything's great. And she's feeling like she's not being seen, right? She's not getting what she wants to thrive in this relationship. And so it's important to check in constantly, right? And this is what coaches are so great for, right? Because I'll go to my coach with a situation and I'm like, okay, here's the situation. Am I seeing this like fully? Right. And sometimes he'll be like, hey, seems like, you're doing the right work. You're asking the right questions. And then other times he's like, hey, dude, did you think about this? And I'm like, oh, man. Right. And so all of this is really just the conscious belief now that I know that I don't know. And it's like that quote, wise is the man that knows he does not know. What is the deeper meaning there, right? What is the right brain esoteric meaning to that? It's that you're okay with anything happening and you're going with the flow of life because your heart is leading you, not the mind that tries to figure things out and everything. It's your heart leading you to where you're meant to be. And, this is like really the special sauce of life for me. Talking about values, talking about rituals, talking about all these things that allow us to remember that we are God embodied in human form. And I love that, man. That is like, oh, this is the best conversation to have around this because, these kind of conversations, they charge my battery, right? And, what can we do for each other among many other things? But what is like, in terms of me, my biggest value with my relationships, it's being a battery charger for other people. And it's the people I choose to be around. It's them charging my battery, right? It's us not falling into victimhood. It's us, realizing that we don't know. It's us being able to laugh like a child. It's us not being attached to things, right? Those are the things that allow me in my personal experience of life to be a battery charger, to put my authentic self and the way I wish to be received and seen out into the world. And that is, once again, the special sauce of life.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree anymore with everything that you shared there.
Yes. And this has been an amazing conversation, bro. I have been absolutely loving this. And we're going to have to get you back on for round 3. This is going to have to be like at least every quarter type thing. Yes. And so please remind the people where they can find you. If you have anything coming up or any services that you're offering right now that you'd like them to know about, please drop anything and everything so people know where to find you.
You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Gandzjuk. You can find me on my site at specializedhealthandexercisecoaching.com. And then you can also just email me at jason@specializedhealthandexercise.com as well. In regards to services, I'm offering right now a PPS Success Mastery coaching program, which is a minimum of 10 hours, 10 to 20 hours. So it goes over professional coaching, personal coaching, and spiritual coaching. So it pretty much encapsulates exactly what you need, catered to what you're wanting to create and accomplish in life. Have it be business related, have it be personally related, relationship related, and of course, spiritually related.
I love that, man. And, you've already answered the final question I usually ask, but I am going to ask it again, and I'll see if the ether comes out with any change I can make in the moment. And that question is this: if someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is the one piece of advice that you would offer them to help them integrate those experiences into their lives? If you had to boil it down to one that you would recommend they do?
Honesty and responsibility. For them to be honest with themselves and for them to take responsibility of what they're actually being honest with. Those two go hand in hand. The two are in a relationship. So to be honest with yourself with what you need to integrate, and then to take the responsibility so you can actually make the change in action that needs to follow from what you actually are aware of.
As a wise man once said, I'll take nail in the head for 500, please. Guys, when Jason reached out to me about doing a round 2 on the podcast, I immediately said yes. His first chapter on the podcast was one of the most enjoyable and informative rides I've gone on yet within this show. And as I said in the intro, I knew we'd only scratched the surface with regards to the information and knowledge he holds in the realms of plant medicines, spiritual teachings, and the like. Jason is truly a master of his craft and someone that allows me to feel safer knowing he is on the planet, as being able to have someone in my circle of family that I can reach out to with the deepest questions in medicine work and life, and be able to have an honest conversation with someone who understands and has had the experiences necessary to be able to understand exactly what I am speaking about is invaluable, reassuring, and gives me a great ease of mind, heart, and soul. Jason, thank you so much once again for stopping back onto the show to share more of your magic with the listeners and me. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light.